The young and the restless spoilers in the opulent foyer of a secluded estate. Hushed whispers of anticipation rippled through the gathered elite as the last of Aristotle Dumas's invitations was accepted. Each gilded envelope, sealed with an enigmatic crest, bore the promise of an evening that would reverberate through Genoa City's power circles for years to come. Word had spread that this would be Victor Newman's most consequential social event in decades. An evening where allegiance would be tested, fortunes potentially won or lost, and the true nature of friendship and family laid bare. Yet unbeknownst to the unsuspecting guests, the soirée was not merely a gathering of the city's influential names, it was the culmination of a masterful scheme, crafted by a man whose intellect and cunning outmatched even Victor's legendary strategic mind. As the grandfather clock struck 8, torches flickered along the drive, casting long, shifting shadows across the manicured lawns where sleek black limousines disgorged fashionably attired invitees. Their laughter and small talk masked an undercurrent of unspoken tension. In a world where power was currency, could anyone truly predict the hand that would be played tonight? Moments before the event, within the plush confines of the Newman penthouse, Victor and Nikki shared a rare moment of complacent pride. Victor, in his tailored tuxedo, had meticulously vetted each guest list and overseen every logistical detail. His children, Adam, the ever-ambitious mastermind in his own right, Victoria, whose blend of compassion and steel made her as formidable in boardrooms as she was in family matters. And Nick, the reluctant heir whose sense of loyalty warred with his thirst for autonomy. All three had received personal summons that carried with them subtle nuances of flattery and intrigue. Individually, each Newman scion had hatched contingency plans to outwit any other bidder for their father's attention. Adam had secured an inside line to the estate's security grid to monitor comings and goings. Victoria had arranged a quiet vantage point from the observation deck to survey the crowd. Nick had entrusted a trusted aide to intercept any digital communication that might hint at ulterior motives. Yet in their confidence, they overlooked the single most important detail. Aristotle Dumas had anticipated every conceivable stratagem. As they toasted what they believed would be their greatest shared triumph, revealing Dumas's true intentions and seizing the moral high ground, their glasses clinked in unison, ironic emblems of unity forged in ignorance. The transition from carefree celebration to harrowing entrapment was as swift as it was brutal. What began as polite applause at Aristotle's opening remarks, a recorded message played across ornate speakers, morphed into chaos when the lights dimmed and masked figures in tailored suits emerged from hidden alcoves. The revelers' laughter died on their lips as they were herded, one by one, through a maze of corridors until Adam, Victoria, and Nick found themselves in a cavernous chamber illuminated by a single overhead spotlight. Before they could react, firm hands pushed them onto ornate chairs bolted to the floor, coarse ropes bit into their wrists, and silver duct tape sealed their mouths with a sickening finality. In the oppressive darkness, their hearts pounded in unison, confusion and betrayal warring for dominance. Then, from a raised dais, a solitary silhouette stepped forward into the glow, its posture exuding both menace and triumph. The stranger's voice, calm and modulated, identified himself as Aristotle Dumas. There was no need for theatrics. His mere presence sufficed to confirm every dread they had failed to acknowledge. With deliberate slowness, Aristotle produced a sleek smartphone and initiated a video call to the Newman study. As the screen flickered to life, Victor and Nikki's expressions transformed from smug satisfaction to raw terror. The sterile walls of the penthouse gave way to the stark reality of their children's plight, three figures bound and gagged, unable to cry out even as their eyes pleaded for rescue. "Good evening," Dumas intoned, his voice carrying across both screens. "You believed you controlled this narrative, Victor. You believed your wealth and reputation could shield you from consequences. Yet here we are. Your progeny, symbols of your legacy, are now my hostages." At that moment, the smooth veneer of Victor's confidence cracked, revealing a primal fear that echoed Nikki's anguished gasp. The cameras panned slowly, capturing every bead of sweat on Victor's brow, every tremor in Nikki's hands as she struggled to silence her own rising panic. Meanwhile, beyond the phone's frame, Adam strained against his bonds. Victoria's fierce glare met the camera's lens, and Nick's jaw clenched in impotent fury. Dumas allowed a beat of pregnant silence to hang between them before delivering the final blow. "I trust you will comply with my demands, or you will witness firsthand the price of underestimating Aristotle Dumas." Then, as abruptly as it had begun, the call ended, leaving Victor and Nikki alone with the stifling enormity of their failure and the chilling question of what would come next. The night air lay heavy over the sprawling Dumas estate, its ancient oaks and manicured hedges shrouded in an almost reverent silence, as though the grounds themselves waited with bated breath for what was to come. Beyond the ivy-clad perimeter walls, Genoa City's glittering skyline had long since slipped below the horizon, and only the estate's ornate iron gates, painted in a deep, ominous black, stood between the unsuspecting city and the abyss unfolding within. In the high-ceilinged great hall, with its marble floors polished to a mirror sheen and the heavy velvet drapes drawn closed against prying eyes, the grand chandelier cast a soft, golden luminescence over the assembled guests. Each one, hand-picked, elite, and unaware, believed they were attending a soirée engineered by Victor Newman himself, a display of power that would outshine every gala in recent memory. Instead, they were unwitting actors in Aristotle Dumas's magnum opus, a carefully woven trap in which every thread led inexorably back to one inevitable moment, the capture of Victor's children. As the last of the revelers drifted in, exchanging courteous smiles and polite small talk, Adam Newman, ever the strategist, subtly swept the room with his eyes, noting every concealed door, every alcove where a guard might lie in wait. He had been handed a map of the estate weeks earlier under the guise of a courtesy briefing for distinguished guests, and he fancied himself ready for any eventuality. Beside him, Victoria Newman glided through the crowd with the poise of a mistress of ceremony, her eyes flicking toward the dais at the far end where she had been told a special announcement awaited. Nick Newman, torn between loyalty and dread, lingered near the perimeter, his fingers tapping out ceaseless Morse code on the leather of his invitation, a subtle distress signal to the aide he had discreetly stationed outside. What none of them realized was that every precaution they had taken had been anticipated, every maneuver countered by Aristotle's taciturn brilliance. He had spent months studying their habits, intercepting communications, and ensuring that by the time they set foot on his turf, they marched willingly into the snare he had laid for them. Moments before the appointed hour, a hush fell over the crowd as Aristotle Dumas himself strode into view. Unseen by most, he watched from a hidden projection room, his form broadcast via holographic screens placed subtly among the foliage of the indoor gardens. When his face materialized above the dais's calm, composed, inscrutable murmurs rippled through the hall. He spoke in a meticulously measured tone, commending Victor Newman on his legacy, lauding the Newman children for their achievements, and inviting them to bear witness to an evening of unrivaled spectacle. It was the preamble to a twisted gift, the illusion of honor masking the reality of betrayal. As each Newman child, Adam with his calculating grin, Victoria with her confident nod, Nick with his uneasy glance, stepped forward to accept Aristotle's invitation to the stage, the room's hidden locks clicked shut, sealing off exits behind them. A second later, the lights dimmed further, plunging the room into a surreal half-light, and masked figures emerged from concealed passageways, herding the guests toward a network of corridors that wound like veins through the bowels of the estate. Within minutes, Adam, Victoria, and Nick found themselves in a vast, vault-like chamber, its walls of cool stone dripping with the weight of centuries. Overhead, a single spotlight bobbed like a baleful eye, illuminating 3 ornate chairs bolted firmly to the floor. Before they could draw breath, the masked operatives, silent, efficient, strapped them into place, ropes cutting into wrists, and pressed thick, industrial-strength tape across their mouths. Panic fluttered in their chests, but beneath it lay the steely core of Newman resolve. They had trained for worse adversaries, yet none had ever subjected them to such calculated cruelty. As the last bonds were cinched tight, the masked guards melted away, leaving the trio alone with their racing hearts and the oppressive hush. Then, from the shadows, a figure emerged at last, Aristotle Dumas in the flesh, tall and composed, his profile a silhouette of menace against the dull glow of the spotlight. He lifted a sleek smartphone, its screen alive with the panic-etched faces of Victor and Nikki Newman, captured through a covert connection to the penthouse war room where the couple pored over live security feeds. Nikki's eyes were red-rimmed from tears, Victor's jaw clenched so hard his knuckles whitened. "Good evening," Aristotle said, his voice resonant and unhurried. "Your children extend their warmest regards." At that word, children. Nikki's knees buckled, and she pressed her hand to the screen, her voice a keening plea even without sound. Aristotle allowed the tableau to hang, savoring each second of horror that registered on their parents' faces. Then he spoke again, and his demand cut through the tension like a blade. "Transfer $1 billion to the account I will provide within 2 hours, or watch as each of your heirs pays the ultimate price." He paused, and the screen flickered off, leaving Victor and Nikki suspended between disbelief and sheer terror. Back in the stone chamber, Adam's mind churned even as his body remained immobilized. He recalled every knot in his Bond survival training, every trick to loosen tape with no hands, yet none applied here, in this subterranean prison. Victoria's emerald eyes blazed with indignation. Her thoughts raced ahead to corporate ramifications, to how they could expose Aristotle's gambit to the press and salvage public sympathy, if only they could speak, move, or live another moment. Nick's vision tunneled inward briefly, the memory of a shared childhood laugh with his father stark against the cold brutality of the present. Together, even in captivity, they formed an unspoken pact, to endure, to resist until the end, and to seize any opportunity Aristotle might inadvertently provide. Above them, in the Dumas estate's upper echelons, Victor slammed his fist onto the polished oak of the command center's central console. "Find every lead on Dumas's offshore holdings. I want banks, brokers, secret shell corporations, no stone left unturned, no ally uncalled." His words crackled like static electricity, igniting Nikki's resolve even as her tears persisted. She joined him, sending out incognito alerts to trusted contacts in law enforcement, cybersecurity specialists, and even a few old adversaries whose personal vendettas against Aristotle might prompt cooperation. Time was their only currency now, and it slipped away with every tick of the gilded clock on the wall. At precisely 1 hour and 30 minutes remaining on the countdown Aristotle had set, Victor spotted movement on a thermal feed. 3 heat signatures converging on a hidden service tunnel beneath the estate's east wing. It was a long shot, the guards there were notoriously vigilant, but it was the only flicker of hope he had. He barked orders, and a small strike team scrambled to its vehicles. Nikki's hands trembled as she handed Victor a dossier of their children's birth charts, family medical records, anything that might identify vulnerabilities Aristotle could exploit further. "He wants to break us," she whispered, her voice thick with grief, "but he won't. We won't let him." Victor turned to her, his expression softened only by the flicker of pride she had always inspired in him, and nodded grimly. "We'll bring them home," he said. "We'll break this monster." In the chamber, Aristotle sensed a shift in the forces arrayed against him. He raised his head, as though listening for a distant hum of engines, and allowed a rare smile to play at the corners of his mouth. He admired Victor's tenacity, few men possessed such ruthless will, but he had built contingencies for contingencies. "Tick-tock," he murmured, pocketing the phone. Then he stepped away, leaving the Newman heirs bound but unbroken, the echo of his footsteps melding with the distant rumble of a rescue that might, or might not, arrive in time. Outside, the night deepened into a cloak of possibility, failure or triumph, ruin or redemption. Every player, from Victor and Nikki scrambling through digital warfare to their children planning jaw-tight defiance in deep captivity, stood on the razor's edge of fate. And at the center of it all, lurking behind every camera angle and every screen feed, Aristotle Dumas watched patiently, confident that when dawn broke over Genoa City, the world would tremble at the cost of underestimating him. Whether the Newman family's legacy would survive this crucible remained to be seen, but one truth shone with crystal clarity: in a game of wits between giants, only the most unyielding spirit could endure the shattering and emerge unbowed. Many of the dozen or so guests who arrived that evening found themselves exchanging furtive glances over the rims of their champagne flutes as they awaited the moment when Aristotle Dumas would step forward and finally unmask himself. Rumors had swirled in the days leading up to the affair that the enigmatic host intended to reveal his true face, to satisfy the endless hunger for gossip in Genoa City, but as the ornate doors of the grand ballroom swung shut behind the last latecomers, it became clear that no grand unveiling was forthcoming. Still, the mere possibility hung in the air like a charged current, electrifying conversations in every corner. "He'll reveal himself tonight," one socialite insisted, adjusting the diamond clasp at her throat. "He must," another whispered, "or why else ply us with such lavish hospitality?" Beneath polite laughter, though, lay a taut undercurrent of suspicion, an intuitive sense among more discerning attendees that Dumas's motives were darker than a mere ego-driven spectacle. Jack Abbott and Diane Jenkins Abbott, whose partnership in business and marriage had weathered more crises than most couples ever imagine, found themselves caught between the heady rush of adventure and the cold calculation their instincts demanded. Diane's eyes sparkled with anticipation as she admired the opulent decor, filigreed ironwork entwined with living vines, tables laid with china pressed in mythic motifs, lights that danced like constellations on the walls. Yet beneath her excitement lay a sharpened caution. "Jack, remember what I said," she murmured, slipping her hand into his as they wound through the crowd. "If anything feels off, we leave immediately. We stick together." Jack, ever the bolder of the two, let out a low chuckle. "Diane, when have I ever let you down? We'll be fine." And though his bravado reassured her in the moment, it was tempered by the gnawing knowledge that a host willing to lure the Newman children into a trap could scarcely be trusted to play fair with anyone. Yet that very uncertainty only fueled their excitement, to tread unknown corridors, perhaps uncover a fragment of Dumas's past, to hold in their hands the secret that had eluded them all this time. With each stolen glance toward the masked servers gliding through the polished crowd, their hearts beat a little faster, balanced precariously between exhilaration and dread. Elsewhere in the cavernous estate, Damien Kane found himself wrestling with a different kind of trepidation and hope. Over the past several weeks, his friendship with Holden Novak had frayed under the weight of rivalries old and new, their bond strained by the relentless pressures of corporate intrigue. Amy Lewis, whose reputation for insight into human nature was rivaled only by her reputation for straight talk, had cornered Damien at the edge of a gallery lined with abstract paintings. "Damien," she said, her voice soft but firm, "you two have history, brothers in all but blood. If you don't remind him of that, someone else will, and it won't be good for either of you." Damien had bristled at first, he was no sentimental fool, but Amy's words took root in his mind. Now, watching from the mezzanine as Aristotle's holographic visage lit up the room, Damien resolved to seize a moment when he and Holden could meet alone. He recalled Holden's birthday, 5 years ago, when he had surprised him with tickets to a jazz club and a handwritten note that had brought tears to his eyes. That memory, he realized, was the compass he needed. As hour bled into hour, the tension thickened. Jack and Diane, having obtained a whispered tip about a hidden alcove rumored to house Dumas's private archives, slipped away from the main ballroom, hearts pounding with every footstep. Their careful negotiation of locked doors and concealed switches brought them at last to a subterranean library lined with leather-bound volumes whose titles hinted at histories written and rewritten by shadowy figures. Diane's breath caught as she thumbed through a ledger annotated in a precise, unfamiliar hand. Could this be Dumas's own accounting of favors exchanged and debts owed? Jack's voice was a hush of triumph and warning. "We shouldn't linger. Whatever this is, it's exactly what we're not supposed to find." Side by side, they retreated into the labyrinth of hallways, determined to carry whatever truths they discovered back to each other. And to decide whether that knowledge would be their salvation or their undoing. Meanwhile, Damien intercepted Holden beneath a cluster of frescoed arches, the noise of the revels receding into a dull roar beyond the heavy doors. He patted his jacket pocket, where he had slipped the small, leather-bound notebook containing the tickets and note from years past. When Holden appeared, silhouetted against the glow of amber wall sconces, Damien saw the familiar tension in his friend's shoulders. The same tension that used to melt away over friendly jabs and mutual challenges. Without a word, Damien produced the notebook. Holden's eyes widened as pages turned to the faded ink of promises and jokes only the two of them shared. For a heartbeat, the stifling weight of corporate rivalry lifted, replaced by the simple bond of brotherhood. "I haven't thought of this in years," Holden murmured, voice tight with emotion. "I thought you'd forgotten." Damien's own throat tightened. "I never could," he replied. "You're my brother, Holden."